In just 1 month, Nigeria produced nearly 250,000 barrels of fuel every single day. And that is the exact fuel the country used to import from the Middle East and Europe. You see, that is a huge shift. But yet, outside the oil industry, very few people are talking about what it really means. And this isn't just about Lagos, because it affects cities like Nairobi, Accra, and even Johannesburg, and every African countries that depends on a steady supply of fuel. Here is a question I want you to think about over the next 15 minutes. What happens when the energy security of an entire continent depends on a single refinery? I want that to sink in within you for a second, because imagine one refinery, one businessman, and half of Africa now quietly dialing his number when the fuel runs low. You see, by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how we got here and why South Africa and Kenya and Ghana are all calling Lagos right now, and whether this is Nigeria winning or Africa losing control of something it should never have handed to one company in the first place. So let's break it down. Before we go further, if you are new here, I welcome you to my channel. I don't read you the news. All I do on this channel is I sit with you and we think through what these stories actually mean. So we think through what the story actually means for your pocket, for your country, and also for the continent of Africa. And if that sounds like your kind of channel, kindly hit the subscribe and drop a comment too, and don't forget to like and also share. So back to the story, because it gets heavier from here. You see, Nigeria has been pumping crude oil for more than 60 years, but instead of turning that crude into fuel at home, it shipped it overseas, and then it bought the finished fuel back at a higher price. I want you to imagine a country that grows cocoa. Instead of making chocolate itself, it decides to export the cocoa bean and let another country make the chocolate, and then buys that same chocolate back for 3 times the price. So that's basically what Nigeria was doing with its oil. So to me, it sounds backwards, right? Exactly. That's how I also feel at the moment. But one will wonder that why did that happen? I can only say it happened because Nigeria's own refineries weren't working properly. They were dysfunctional, because this noble country has 4 state-owned refineries, and on paper those refineries can process about 445,000 barrels of crude oil per day, but for many years they operated far below their capacity. Some were barely working at all. So I can say that they suffered from poor maintenance and repeated breakdown and years of underinvestment. Yes, underinvestment, because tell me how we got to that. And as a result, Nigeria had little choice but to keep importing fuel. Yeah, they have no choice than to keep importing fuel. And the government agency responsible for overseeing this part of the oil industry is the NMDPRA, the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. So I want you to remember that name for a second, because later in this episode, that same regulator make a move that changes everything in the whole of Africa. So how did we get from that broken system to now? You see, back in 2016, Aliko Dangote, who happens to be the richest man in Africa, broke ground on a refinery in Lagos. And that refinery is not a small upgrade. I mean, it's a 650,000 barrel a day monster. So it's built on a plot of land that is that is bigger than Lagos Island itself. Yeah, it's a massive refinery. So, but building the refinery wasn't easy because it took about 9 years to complete, and a lot of factors caused why it was delayed. COVID was one of the major delays. The foreign exchange problem also made things worse for Dangote. Even getting enough crude to the refinery was so difficult because much of the crude was already tied to a long-term contract by the government of Nigeria. So, and this contract is not even open to the citizens. But after an investment of about $20 billion, the refinery finally reached full capacity in early 2026.
And of course the products. Do you want to just speak to what this is really? And then
this one is the gasoline. This is the PMS. You can see the diesel. Because I'm sure most Nigerians, they have never ever seen this color of diesel. But this is what you call Euro 5 diesel. It's less than 10 ppm. And, that is sulfur-wise. Okay, so this is what will really help, actually, to help the engines, vehicles, you name it.
And the timing couldn't have been more important than that time, because just as the refinery became fully operational, a major crisis erupted outside Nigeria in February 2026. And what happened was that Iran blocked the Strait of Hormuz. And that sounds like a distant event to some people, but I can say it affects the whole world, because the Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most important shipping routes. Nearly one of every 5 barrels of oil used around the globe passes through that narrow waterway. So that's how important the Strait of Hormuz is. Okay, so for East and Southern Africa, the impact is even bigger because they could not get enough fuel. So think about that for a second. 75% of fuel supply was suddenly at risk almost overnight. So you begin to wonder, what now happened next? Government start to panic, and Bloomberg even reported that South Africa went looking for a 12-month fuel supply deal directly with Dangote Refinery. So not with Saudi Arabia, not with the usual Gulf suppliers. They went with a private refinery in Lagos. And not only South Africa, Ghana called, Kenya also called, and Dangote himself told the economists that right now it isn't even about the price, it's about whether the fuel shows up at all. Yes, because the demand is now becoming something that Dangote was even thinking he could not handle. Now look at what happened next, because the number tells the story. And according to the report from S&P Global Shipping Data, it's in its report said that West Africa's fuel import from outside the continent fell sharply in just 1 month, and in April the region imported about 997,000 barrels of fuel a day. So by May they had dropped to about 765,000 barrels per day. So that is not a gradual change. That is like a major shift in a single month. So it shows that more of Africa's fuel supply was starting to come from one place and no other place but Lagos, Nigeria. And Dangote is actually not stopping there. at all, because in July 2026, its company announced that their plan to invest another $46 billion by 2028, and the goal is not just to maintain what it had already built. Its goal is to expand even further. Yeah, they are thinking global, they are thinking of doing more numbers, and the plan would actually increase Nigeria's refining capacity to about 1.4 million barrel per single day. So it also includes building a second refinery in Kenya with capacity of 700,000 barrels per day. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that the company wants to strengthen its position in West Africa and build a major presence in East Africa as well. So, and here is the part that really stand out for me, because at the same time Dangote's refinery was actually expanding, Nigeria oil regulator, the NMDPRA, which we mentioned earlier, if you remember, they suspended fuel imports license for some of the biggest companies that are still bringing petrol into the country. And those companies are not strange companies to us. They are big names in the continent, especially in Nigeria. And the companies included the Corn Oil, MRS, and the subsidiary of Total Energies. So together, all these companies I just mentioned, they handle about a quarter of West Africa gasoline imports. So that is a huge volume they are doing. So this isn't just a story about Dangote gaining market share. It's also about government policy that is changing the market around him. There's another major development that came up. Dangote announced plans to list up to 10% of the refinery onto Nigerian stock market exchange through an initial public offering, or IPO. So, and according to Business Insider Africa, one reason for the listing is to reduce concern that a single company could end up controlling too much of Africa's fuel supply. Think about that for a moment, as in, when part of the public message behind selling shares is to ease fear about market dominance, it shows those concerns are being taken so seriously. And let's step back a bit and look at the bigger picture. And this story was never just about building a refinery. It's about who controls the fuel that keeps economies running. You see, fuel powers transport, move goods, support businesses, and help keeps the food prices stable. That is how important and how powerful fuel is. And for many years, much of Africa depends on refineries in Europe, the Middle Belt, and Asia. Those are the main dependents of Africa. So, but today, a growing share of that fuel is being refined in Africa, Lagos to be precise, in Nigeria. So when you look at all of this, Nigeria gains much value from its own crude oil instead of sending that value overseas. And government also benefit because it now has a stronger domestic refining industry in its country. But there are so many other that could lose, yes, because international fuel traders may actually lose businesses, and they will lose businesses, and many African countries will also become more dependent on fuel supplied by one private company in another country. So these are the ups and downs that that surrounds this Dangote refinery of a thing. And you see, that raises an important question, and it is not just about business alone, it's about the energy security. And you see, the people who feel the impact most are ordinary Africans, because the truck driver, the trader, the farmer, and the market women in Accra, Nairobi, or anywhere across Africa, if fuel becomes more expensive or it becomes harder to get, they are often the first to feel it. Yes, they feel the heat first, because that's what they depend on day to day. Now, let's look at the other side of the argument, because that is also important if we are going to be fair on this Dangote refinery analysis. And many people would say that Nigeria earned this moment for decades. The country exported crude oil, but imported the fuel made from it. That made little economic sense, because Dangote invested about $20 billion to change that narrative, and it took a huge financial risk to do that. Yeah, so that is I don't even know what to say. And you see, some would also argue that if countries like Kenya or South Africa are now buying fuel from Nigeria, it is not because Nigeria forced them to. It is because they didn't build enough refining capacity themselves. And a lot of arguments come up. And Kenya planned refinery project with Dangote is actually also being presented as a partnership. If it succeeds, Kenya could eventually strengthen its own refining industry, and then there is a planned IPO by selling part of the refinery to the public. Ownership would be shared more widely instead of remaining entirely in private hands. And those are reasonable arguments. So all I've just presented to you are arguments by people, but you see, here is why the bigger question still remains. Even if a refinery is built in Kenya, if it is owned and operated by a Nigerian company, Nigeria still has significant influence over that asset. And you see, selling 10% of the refinery through an IPO still leaves the vast majority under same ownership. And that is what I felt, that is what I think. And if I may conclude all this thing by saying, Nigeria has taken a commanding position in Africa's refining industry, while other countries were still relying on imported fuel. Nigeria invested in large-scale refining capacity. As a result, many countries are now looking to Lagos, just for part of their fuel supply. And you see, one thing is that doesn't necessarily mean Africa has solved its energy security challenges, because in some cases it may actually simply mean dependence is shifting from suppliers outside Africa to a major supplier within Africa. So it's no longer just a Nigerian story. Yeah, it's not just a Nigerian story. It's a question for the entire African continent. If a growing share of Africa's fuel comes from one company, what happens if that supply is disrupted or business priorities changes? Yeah. It's funny, right? And if you have a family back home, this matters to you too, because fuel price affect transport cost, and transport cost affects food prices in the end. So fuel price affects the cost of living it affects the cost of everyday life. And we need to keep our eye on the planned refinery project in Kenya. We need to keep a close monitoring on that. If construction begins before the end of 2026, it could help expand refining capacity in East Africa. And if it faces delay, then the country may remain dependent on fuel supply from Nigeria for even longer period of time. So let's go back to the question that we started with. And the question is, what happened when more Africa energy security depends on one single refinery? And that is a question the continent is beginning to answer right now. And I want to know your honest answer in the comment section. Let's rub minds together. Let's discuss about this, and let's know what is going on in Africa. And I want you to share this video to who might want to understand what is going on in Africa. And I want you to also share your thoughts in the comment section about this saga. Is it a good development for Kenya? Is it a win for Africa? Whatever your thoughts are, I want to know them in the comment section. And I will see you on the next one.